Good evening, friends. Let me begin with a simple but unsettling truth. When weapons fly across borders, it is never just about missiles or iron domes. It is about economics. It is about empire. And it is about the costs of a global system that profits from perpetual instability. Now, many are watching the recent escalation. Yemen, one of the poorest countries on earth, launching missiles that have managed to challenge one of the most heavily militarized and technologically sophisticated states in the world, Israel. But to truly understand what's happening here, we must step outside the narrow frame of military news reports and ask, what created this contradiction? How does a country devastated by war, famine, and foreign intervention manage to produce a missile system capable of shaking the regional balance? Nation devastated by nearly a decade of foreign intervention, famine, and economic collapse, has sent a message louder than any missile. When injustice reaches its breaking point, even the seemingly powerless can challenge the powerful. We must stop thinking of military strength solely in terms of hardware, GDP, or Western alliances. True power, history has shown us time and again, lies in the capacity of people to resist when their survival is no longer negotiable. When Yemen's missiles challenge Israel's defenses, what we're witnessing is not just a military provocation. It's the eruption of pressure long built up under systems of exploitation and inequality. How can a country that has been the subject of blockades, drone strikes, and international neglect still manage to develop and launch strategic missiles? Because desperation, when paired with purpose, becomes innovation. Because people who are denied basic dignity often become the sharpest critics and challengers of the global order that denied them that dignity. And when a population feels it has nothing left to lose, that is when the status quo is truly at risk. There is a dangerous arrogance in assuming that military might can indefinitely suppress the will of a people. Empires throughout history, from Rome to the British, have fallen not simply because of foreign enemies, but because they underestimated the power of those they oppressed. The same mistake is being made today. Western powers continue to pour billions into arms, surveillance, and defense systems, believing that technological superiority is an impenetrable shield. But missiles, no matter how crude, launched from a war-torn country like Yemen, reveal that no defense system is invincible when the people on the other side are driven not by conquest, but by survival and resistance. This should be a wake-up call. Not only to the governments funding endless wars, but to all of us watching from afar. The balance of power is shifting, not because new weapons are being made, but because the people most dehumanized by this system are now refusing to play by its rules. That shift is not only military, it is political, economic, and deeply human. And it demands our attention, not just as spectators of conflict, but as participants in shaping what comes next. What we often call conflict or war is, in truth, the surface symptom of a much deeper and more systemic disease: exploitation. Missiles may dominate the headlines, but it is the quiet, relentless extraction of resources, labor, and dignity that sets the stage for every so-called security crisis. The case of Yemen and its confrontation with Israel is not simply a geopolitical issue, it is the result of an economic structure that thrives on inequality and division. Until we understand that, we will remain trapped in a cycle of reaction, always responding to the fire, never to the spark that lit it. Yemen's missiles are not created in a vacuum. Nor are they simply the product of ideology. They are the material response to decades of underdevelopment, foreign occupation, and economic manipulation. For years, Yemen has been reduced to a pawn on the chessboard of imperial interests, its ports blockaded, its infrastructure decimated, its people left to starve. All the while, global powers have reaped the benefits: weapons sales, strategic dominance, and access to vital trade routes and resources. What looks like a regional conflict is, in fact, the inevitable backlash against a system that places profit above people and control above cooperation. When the world sees Israel deploying its billion-dollar Iron Dome to intercept rockets from one of the most impoverished nations on Earth, it may interpret that as a triumph of technology over threat. But the real story is far more complex, and far more revealing. What is being defended is not just territory, it is a global economic order. An order where a small elite profits from the subjugation of entire populations. An order where military budgets rise while public health and education budgets shrink. An order where the same corporations that sell weapons in the Middle East lobby for austerity policies at home. If you strip away the political labels, the headlines, and the carefully chosen words of diplomats, what remains is a story of economic injustice. War becomes the enforcement mechanism of a system that cannot maintain its grip through consent alone. Yemen's defiance is not born out of aggression, it is born out of abandonment. And that should challenge all of us to reconsider what we call security. Because true security will never come from missiles or borders. It will only come from justice, economic, social, and political. Until that is addressed, the symptoms will keep returning, and the cycle will remain unbroken. Across borders, across languages, and across political systems, the working class shares a reality far more unifying than any flag or ideology: exploitation. The missiles in the Middle East, the economic crises in the West, the labor strikes in Europe, and the migration waves across continents, they all stem from a single truth we are rarely encouraged to say out loud. The global economy is built on inequality, and the working class pays the price no matter which side of the map they're on. Yemen's missiles challenging Israel's high-tech defenses may look like a local or regional event, but it is in fact a mirror reflecting a much larger global dynamic: the struggle between concentrated wealth and collective labor. Israel, often presented as a symbol of modernity and military sophistication, spends billions, much of it funded by foreign taxpayers, on its security apparatus. But at what cost? Inside its own borders, economic inequality is rising. Working-class Israelis, especially those from marginalized communities, face soaring housing costs, underfunded schools, and a shrinking social safety net. At the same time, in Yemen, workers and families endure unimaginable conditions: famine, displacement, and foreign-imposed economic isolation. Two populations on opposite sides of a military confrontation, yet both crushed under the same economic logic, one that places weapons above welfare and profit above people. This is not accidental. The capitalist system depends on division, between nations, ethnic groups, religions, and classes, to keep workers from recognizing their shared position. It turns one group's suffering into another group's distraction. It convinces a factory worker in Tel Aviv that their security is threatened by a child in Sana'a, while quietly shifting more public funds into the hands of arms manufacturers and political elites. It tells an unemployed Yemeni youth that their enemy is the Israeli state, not the international financial institutions that have turned their economy into rubble. But here lies the potential for transformation. When workers on all sides begin to see through the illusion of difference, when they recognize that they are all subsidizing the same system, all losing control over their labor, their futures, and their communities, that is when solidarity becomes possible. That is when resistance becomes powerful. Because when the working class, fractured and fragmented, begins to act together. Across walls, checkpoints, and oceans, it no longer begs for change. It demands it. And no defense system in the world can intercept that.